there's a lot of like conspiracies attached to XRP that we've touched on briefly here, but like one that I've seen headlines for is that like XRP has a plan to like overtake the dollar and stuff like that. Can you speak to any of those?
Yeah. Yeah, I've talked about it a little bit on my channel too. It's like this idea that potentially this system where once again we have all these different digitized or tokenized fiat currencies on the XRP ledger. Okay, great. Now on this XRP ledger, you can also tokenize any other asset. So let's say one country wants to tokenize gold. Okay, or rather not a country, but let's say we have tokenized gold on the ledger. And when one country wants to assign essentially or allocate their digital currencies to essentially be backed by this gold that's also tokenized. They could like issue it, 1-to-1 for gold. They could say 1-for-2 for gold or whatever. They could do that on the XRP ledger. And so with that being said, there's a system in place here that would allow any sort of a new form of digital currency to be created based upon the tokenization of the assets on the ledger. You could back currencies with whatever you own or whatever you
Mm,
want to back it with. So with that being said, Ripple is a United States based company, period. Point blank, period. They do have a large portion of XRP. The question really is if you issued these types of currencies on this XRP ledger, would that accrue value to XRP? You need XRP, even if you didn't need XRP for this cross-border settlement process. Okay, cool. If you were going to issue currencies on the XRP ledger, you need XRP to pay fees on the ledger. The fees are pretty small. They're basically negligible, but that still creates some level of demand for the token, right? You want to keep your costs at zero. So if you own the token, then your costs are much lower. Um, and in fact, if the price of that token goes up and you own the token, not only are you now paying lower fees because you own the token and rather the fees become negligible, but also uh, you're making money, right? You're gaining value because the price of the token is going up and you own it. So anyways, the question would have to be, I guess, if there were some grand plot to like replace the US dollar with XRP, then the system to do that exists. And the stablecoin RLUSD that is now on the XRP ledger is definitely a very primary step to kind of either replacing the US dollar or enforcing, right, the demand for treasuries, right, that has come in through the Stablecoin Act, the Genius Act, and things like that. So there's plenty of different stablecoins. There are a lot of stablecoins that have more traction than RLUSD. But once again, when we're talking about this mechanism of actually using XRP potentially as an asset that settles as a bridge currency between all of these other fiat currencies that have now been tokenized, then RLUSD sits in a specific spot to create demand for US treasuries, but then also the XRP token in general could be valued based upon this entire system being built on the XRP ledger. Hopefully that answers the question a little bit. But to get to the conspiracy is what I would say here is like, okay, XRP has this escrow, but they have control over that escrow for the most part. So the big conspiracy that people have out there is like, oh, well, XRP is either going to be like that escrow is either going to be like donated to the United States or even potentially confiscated by the United States. So that's like the tinfoil hat version of like how this becomes like a United States thing,
mm,
I guess.
got it. No, that makes total sense. And it does seem where crypto is going to go that whether it's publicly announced or whether it's done behind closed doors, that the US government will be more and more involved with a lot of things crypto. Like if you look at these Bitcoin reserve companies and all that stuff, like if Bitcoin becomes what I think it can become, it almost becomes, I don't know if dangerous is the word, but insane to think about how much power a Bitcoin reserve company like Sailor Strategy could have if it stops being pegged to the dollar. Like where does it end? And I think that that's something that is not too dissimilar from, I guess, why people think that XRP could be a plot to take over the dollar. But it'll be super interesting to watch. Like all this stuff is so fascinating. It's moving really, really fast, as we've talked about before, in terms of actually getting pushed into law.